we are already in the final of our AI track for today. And so even Mary can learn something now just because we talk about branding in AI, how AI knows how consumers see your brands. And I bring a spoiler, digital twins might be a solution. And we have a real expert in that field. It's Dr. Jonathan Mall. Dr. Jonathan Mall is the CEO and founder of Neuro Marketing. And Jonathan, it's a pleasure to have you here. The stage is yours. Welcome.
All right. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much to Dirk for the kind invitation and for Mary for sharing so much about the open source ethos and us really, working together to achieve higher goals. So let me start with a question. Who of you has recently looked at reviews of one of your properties or one of your products online? Hand up if you have checked that. All right, it's quite a few. Now imagine that AI could now predict how people perceive your offering, your website, your content, your brand, whether they would find it appealing enough maybe to book traveling. This is the subject of this talk, that AI can indeed do that up to an accuracy of 92%. And to illustrate, I would love to use the example of the generational divide. So there are many voices saying that we all have different generations. I'm a millennial, just barely, but of course there are many others. And let me illustrate by comparing now Gen Z and millennials versus boomers. So for example, the ones on the left, they're actually responsible for 60% of all bookings of hotels in 2024. But the boomers, they are the highest spenders. So they are less, but they spend more money. Let's look at another comparison. Now only looking at Gen Z. Gen Z, they want sustainable options. They very often talk about sustainable options and how important they are, but it's often the boomers who can actually afford them. Next, Gen Z is generally more tech savvy, but at the same time, they can also be quite skeptical about the digital privacy. Who has my email? Should I get the newsletter here and add it to the 59 others that I get on a daily basis? The boomers, on the other hand, are very often less tech savvy, but they trust institutions. They're more likely to then download like the Hilton app or something like that because they trust that institution. And if you frame these digital assets as convenient, they're also more likely then to adopt them. And the last one, and this is very dear to my heart because I'm a psychologist, Gen Z, compared to the boomers, are digitally way more connected. I mean, if you have children, there's a chance that they have more followers than you. So they're more connected. However, they're also more lonely. So depression, especially since COVID, and loneliness is a big problem in that generation, so they actually crave social connections. Whereas, as you can see, the boomers, they have learned to still communicate face-to-face and maybe call someone, and that has led to more connections. And who knew, right, that giving someone who's 5-year-old a cell phone to fall asleep to didn't turn out so well? Who knew? OK, so our question here today is, how can you know what your target audience wants? What do you need to say to make them come to your country, to your hotel, to buy your product? Well, traditionally, what you would do is you would simply ask them. You would take someone like this digital trendsetter Gen Z person, you would ask, hey, what do you think about traveling? And then they would give you the answer. And we can maybe put this answer together, have this little graphic where you can see what they're talking about. So they may, and you see now this being reflected with the data before, they talk about the cultural immersion, sustainable travel, and maybe digital connection, so using an app to maybe check into the hotel. But these answers didn't come from an actual human. These came from a so-called digital twin, or as we call them, silicon subjects. So those are actually AIs that we have defined that can give us answers like real humans with between 85 and 92% overlap with real human answers. So who is this guy talking to you right now? My name is Dr. Jonathan Mall, as I was already introduced. Thank you very much, Dirk, again. So I've been studying cognitive neuropsychology, did that until 2013, but since 2017, we have been building large language models to simulate what people are thinking and feeling using technology. And we have now done for many brands, including obviously many travel and leisure brands, to look at content, look at their brand, see what people think, and optimize their offerings. And I've also researched at many institutions in the Netherlands, England, and Germany. So let me give me one example of how I got into this. Quite a personal story. I was in Singapore with my wife, and so I would order lemonade because I was jet-lagged, and she ordered a beer. And when the waiter came, he gave her the lemonade and me, the man, the beer. Very common, right? You have the same with steak and salad. There are many of those things. And I wondered, could I have predicted that? And the answer is yes. So that was many years ago, so these networks look a little bit different, but I created an association network based on our large language models to show, and you can see it here in green, that there are more connections between the word man and beer than between man and lemonade. Meaning that because of these predicted connections, the waiter, it was easier for him to connect the beer with the man and therefore give it to me. How would that apply to a real business use case? So let's look at a project that we did in the cruise ship world. So obviously, as with many things, they fight waves, and yes, we should lean into those waves, but for them it often means you have to stand out from the clutter. There's so much content out there about things you should book this or that travel or cruise ship, so how can you really stand out? What we did, we created digital twins of their target audience, and then produced this association network, where you can see everything connected with cruise ship, traveling, and then see how each of these different segments is different. And there are so many cool things that you can glimpse here. What you see at the bottom is a network with over 1,000 connections, and more in green and red you see whether people like things or not. The more green something is, the more they like it. And one thing I can tell you, and I'm very happy because I'm also aging, is that with age, the network gets greener. It's a well-known psychological effect that with age, people get happier, on average, not everyone. But you can see it here. On the right side, the network is greener. And the families in the middle, they have the reddest network. Who of you has children and can attest to them, that sometimes being a red issue? Well, yeah, you see it here as well. The case, however, is that for all these three segments, there are certain concepts surrounding cruise ships and traveling that they really like. And then there are some concepts that both or many groups like. So there's an overlap sometimes where you can use the same message to target two different segments. Let's look at a couple of examples. Things that they like and dislike. So the couples love adventure. Being in love, going on a cruise, they love the adventure, but they don't like the tech and modernization. They actually want to turn the cell phone off. The families, they like the guidance, they like the mentorship, they like the structure. The kid can go somewhere, basically, and they don't like uncertainty. On a cruise ship, they want things to be organized and structured. Uncertainty is also an issue for the Silver Explorers, and they also do these things because there's a spiritual component to them. For them, it's like the lifelong dream to go on this cruise, and it's almost like, their path that requires seeing the world one last time and those kind of things. How can you then use this? Well, you can create groups, again, for everyone or the individual subsegments, then look at the associations that they really like, and then create claims content that is best aligned with that subsegment or everyone together. And doing so, applying this, has helped this company to increase the engagement on, for example, their social media posts and their newsletter by up to 30%. OK, some action steps. So how would you implement this? We would start always with creating this AI audience. So we need to look, what is your buyer persona, and create a digital twin, a silicon subject that looks like your persona. You can picture it like this, where in this case you have 9 different people, everything obviously AI generated, all the images as well, and each of them now needs what you have. They need a story. Quick thinking, right? If you would write down, like, I don't know, who of you has a diary by any chance? Hey, that's still some. All right. So let's imagine everything that's in your diary, and you have done that really every day for all your life, that could be a pretty good representation about who you are, I would assume. And it's the same with these digital twins. We actually give them properties like how old you are, etc., give them a whole backstory and opinions, basically like a diary, and it's very, very long, in order to truly represent who they are. And optional, we also add validation data to it, so maybe you know exactly how they are, and we can put this also into the data. So in practice, this may look like this. We have someone, this one person, she has a name, she has an age, a location, she has demographics, she has a backstory, and this backstory is very much concatenated here. And they also have opinions, and as you can see, therapy is necessary. But again, this is a digital twin. So in essence, this is a text file. This is a very long document describing this person, and we can then combine this with a large language model in order to predict for basically any question what this person will think about that. And this is what we do next. Step number 2 is you ask the AI audience. And the technology behind it is pretty straightforward. You put in the answer, you ask each of these profiles, you then combine all the answers, and you have your executive summary. So this is exactly like traditional market research, only that instead of asking people, you ask all these AI silicon subjects. Let's look at what we can learn. So here we have one of them. Right? This is our Gen Z digital trendsetter. We can see that she associates with traveling sustainable travel. Now that means that clearly they do like eco-friendly traveling, but they don't like the high cost. So recommendation, pretty straightforward, offer something that is budget-friendly, but also addresses this eco-consciousness that the Gen Z traveler appreciates. Next, we can look at cultural immersion. So again, I told you they can feel lonely. So once they're out and they can see people, that's a good thing. So they do value these immersive experiences, cultural activities. So the recommendation, also quite straightforward, give that to them. Cultural tours, pub crawls, and make it a story. Because don't forget, and you'll see that in a sec, stories and authenticity is very important to this group. And you can see it here in the Instagrammable spots. A very early association of the Gen Z. They want Instagrammable content, meaning that they want to share the story that they're having in your property with your product. And so let them have that fun. We were in Indonesia in a great place that actually, it was a great place, but it didn't look great. But the owner had done something really special. She invited a really good graffiti artist from Spain who painted the super gray walls beautifully. And they were the ideal spots to make pictures in front of. And they were thematically related to the experience. And even though everything else honestly looked kind of crappy, because of that Instagrammable image, it stays in my mind as something beautiful, and I shared it as something beautiful as well. I would like now to show you the video of how this can be done in an app. This is the app Neuro that we've been working on for the last 8 years. Can you play the video, please? Play the video, please. Somebody's running. Something is perfect. OK, here you go. Interface, and we can now ask a question. In this case, it's Albania. You know why? They're the sponsor of this fine event. And I can tell the engine now what is the target audience. It's Gen Z. And now we ask a question. What do you think about Albania? What are the top reasons to travel to Albania? What could someone say to make you want to go to Albania? And we execute in the correct language. Now, step 1 and 2 are now executing. In the background, Gen Z profiles are being built, selected from the database, with the long backstory, and you have the opinions. You let them really have relationships, interests, a dog. Maybe the dog just ran away. Everything that can happen is happening in these silicon subjects. And then all the answers are combined, and you can see the executive summary. And this took 2 minutes. There was a little cut in the middle for your sake, but it took about 2 minutes to do all that, and you are you end up with a report that shows exactly what these very expensive studies showed in the beginning, that they like the affordability, while they're still committed to sustainability, it needs to be affordable. There's the natural beauty that Albania has. Obviously, the model knows Albania. They can relate that to the audience. And you can even see for every persona exactly what their thoughts were about the question and what their eventual answer was. Now take 1 second to hopefully appreciate how back in the days, this would have cost you weeks and 5-figure at least to get this kind of insight with a reasonably big enough target group of real people. But we can do this in silicon very fast, quite cost effective. And of course, you want to validate, right? You want to know, how good is this? This is always the question that we get. OK, great, but how good is it? And this, I promise, is the hardest graph to understand. So what you see is 2 axes. On the one is the NeuroFlash twin, and the other is the actual human rating. So those are more than 1,000 people who have given, no, actually, sorry, these are 1,000 ratings, but it's more than 6,000 people who have given here the ratings, and we take the average. And a perfect line would be a correlation of 1. That's the perfect correlation. They're exactly the same. We get a correlation of 0.845. As a psychologist, this would be like you would scream eureka, because this is really, really high. We have since then, actually in our latest study, achieved 92%. So 0.92 correlation. Out of 11 questions asked to the silicon subject, 10 were exactly the same as with the real subjects. Explaining 85% of the variance means that if you have nothing, this is amazing. If you have the money to do an actual study, you can probably do 5 like this and get 5 times the insights super fast. But let me address why I think this is very relevant now and why it is relevant to me. I already told you that I have studied psychology. And when I started studying, the professor showed me the brain and said to me, Jonathan, the brain is actually not there for thinking. And I was very surprised, because they explained to me in many years that the brain is actually there to help us be very efficient in reaching our goals. Our brain, when going to the gym, thinks it's better to take the escalator than taking the steps to get fit. And let me test this with you. When you think of America, what do you think is more likely? To be hit by lightning or to be killed in a school shooting? So who thinks that getting hit by lightning is more likely? Hand up. It's like 4 or 5 people. And who thinks the school shooting is more likely? It's definitely the majority. It is 10 times more likely to be hit by lightning. I did a trick, of course. I said in the beginning, America. And what does the word America trigger in your minds? It triggers all of the stories, all the media stories about people being killed in these terrible, terrible, terrible shootings. And you very rarely see anything about the many people that get hit by lightning because, yeah, some guy got hit by lightning and he survived. That's not a story. By the way, very often they do survive, which is fantastic news. So, but still don't run into them. Point being, you have seen this flag. And I want to, when I made the presentation, this just kind of happened. Because I don't know about you, but in the last couple of days, this flag has many new associations. I would bet that people from Greenland and Canada right now don't see this flag and think, gee, I really want to travel there now. I actually think they're changing their travel plans. And at the same time, being from Germany, I see this flag, maybe in danger, and it reminds me of, who I call, or what I call myself, my own identity. So to illustrate a little personal story, when I was young, I often saw an empty chair where my father should be. He's alive, no worries. But he was traveling a lot. He was working in London, Singapore, India, everywhere. This had a positive side because he took us with him. Very often we would travel to India, Singapore, all these different places. We spent some years there even. And through all those travels, I learned a lot about the world, people, what made me me, and what values we share. And these values that we share through traveling can be represented like this, but I think, and Mary also touched on this, which I love. I think traveling instills a feeling of us. And this is why I'm so excited to speak to you today, because I think making more people experience this, understanding who the travelers are that can go to your properties and letting them have that experience, I think is fundamentally a very, very good thing in today's world. So let me come back to the initial question. How do you know what your customers want? I hope that you got away from this talk that it is that we now have an ability to simulate them in silicon. We call it the AI audience. And when you look at your marketing decisions for your brand, for your content, for your product, taking the perspective of the people that you are communicating to, the real people, I think leads to better decisions than using your gut feeling alone. And using AI in this way to better communicate with people, I think will also make more humans fall in love with your brand. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. I have to admit, when you first released this word silicon subject, I had a quite freaky and non-adult association. But so I would like to stay on digital twins instead. But absolutely. You're in marketing for much longer than we have Gen AI. How did it turn to your? How did it change your job now? We learned that we will become generative optimizing or agent optimizing instead of SEO, and we know that branding gets a completely different role. Digital twins can help, but in general, how did it change your job? How did it change your company?
Yeah, it changed a lot. So initially, we created large language models to evaluate content.
Yeah.
And actually, before generative AI, what would happen is that we go to a big company, say Nivea, and we'd be like, look, we can test hundreds of your slogans. And they'd be like, great. Let me call my agency to see which 2 slogans we currently have. And then they brought back 2 slogans, and yeah, that was not a job for evaluative AI, right? Too little content. So with Gen AI, which back then already existed, it was just very bad, we're starting to be able to indeed create 100 slogans, 1,000 slogans, and then evaluate them, see who likes them, to bubble up the top 10, and then test the top 3 with actual humans. So this was the beginning. So I think the generative AI just made being able to create variability in what you could say, that is what increased. And now the big question is, how do you prevent not sounding like anyone who can use ChatGPT, right? That's the first thing. And then second, realize that your brand is doing it and that the target audience is reached by whatever content you're creating.
Yeah. Search engine optimizing or search engine marketing was almost trial and error. It was no one knows the algorithms. Is it the same now with AI? No one knows the algorithm. Do you have test and learn, or is there any difference?
I mean, you can look in them. DeepSeek is open source. You can look
Right.
at the weights. But looking at the weights very often doesn't tell you anything. It's just billions and billions of parameters.
Yes.
So you need to test them, right? And that is obviously what we do. We test them. We have lots of tests that we let them go through. We do the correlations to ensure that things happen in a predictable and correct way. Yeah, you have to do all those things.
Lots of work.
Yes.
Lots of challenges, lots of chances. Jonathan Mars, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. And that was the final of our AI track for this year. I'm confident we'll have another one in 2026, and we are back here on the stage tomorrow up from 10:30, I think. And we'll have a destination tech track later on up from 2:30. So it was a pleasure to have you here, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back tomorrow. See you all again, and thanks for being here.